If you guys watch my channel consistently and have been subscribed for a while, you know that I'm a big Toronto Raptors fan. I live in Canada. I've been a Raptors fan since about 2014 or 2015. That was really when I started following the NBA. But they've obviously got a ton of criticism over the course of this last season because of their horrible season. And I've really wanted to make this video for a while. But as you can see in the title, just like I said, the Toronto Raptors were obviously horrible in this 2021 season. But personally, as a fan of the Raptors, I'm actually completely fine with them having a terrible season like this. And in today's video, I'm going to be explaining multiple reasons why I think that, going over the brief kind of history of the Raptors in the last few years, what they've done in the last few years as a franchise, and ultimately, like I said, why as a fan of the Raptors, I'm actually not at all ashamed of their horrible 2021 season. And while this might seem ridiculous, like I said, I'm going to be explaining in today's video why this is the case for me. With that being said, let's get right into the video. So as we know, in the 2013 and 14 NBA season, this is when the Raptors started to really put themselves on the map as a contender. They made the playoffs this year. They had a great duo formed of DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. And personally, as a fan of the Raptors and now a fan of the entire NBA, this duo right here was really, not even gonna lie, what made me fall in love with the game of basketball. Not only on the court, but off the court, obviously them being such good friends. And this duo right here was so fun to watch night in and night out, especially in the regular season. But it's no secret that, unfortunately, in the playoffs, especially us as Raptors fans, we had to accept the fact that they weren't going to get anything done in the playoffs when it comes to contending for a championship. We know they had that heartbreaking Game 7 loss in the first round against the Brooklyn Nets in 2014. They got swept in the first round of the 2015 playoffs against the Washington Wizards. Then they made some really positive changes to their team, became a legitimate contender in lots of people's eyes, made the conference finals in 2016, and lost in 6 games to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then ever since there, it was downhill for the next 2 years. They then got eliminated by LeBron and the Cavs, as we know. For the next 2 years, they got swept in the second round back-to-back years, and this was heartbreaking as Raptors fans because especially in 2017 and 18, it really hit us hard that a duo of DeMar and Lowry isn't going to get the job done as a core duo. So then, of course, as we all know, they go out and make this blockbuster trade to get Kawhi Leonard. If Masai Ujiri says this is enough, it's time to just go all in on one season. Now this is something you really have to keep in mind here because the Raptors were not making this trade at all thinking about their future. The plan was not to get Kawhi Leonard, keep him, and create this huge dynasty. The plan was to make an all-in trade, give up DeMar DeRozan and a future piece in Jakob Poeltl, and go all in on one season because that's why Kawhi Leonard was available for a trade right there. He had 1 year left on his contract. He requested a trade, and the Raptors went out to get him, like I said, not to build a dynasty, but to have one chance at winning the championship. So obviously, as we know, they go out there and get the job done. They have an incredible season as an overall team. This was the funnest team I've ever had to watch, especially because it was my own team. But we know that also at the trade deadline that year, they went out and got Marc Gasol, which was a great addition to their team, a very good veteran piece. They gave up a traditional center in Jonas Valanciunas and able to get him. Gasol played a huge role for them in 2019, mostly defensively, specifically in that series against the Sixers, really locking up Joel Embiid in the paint, being able to stretch the floor a little bit in 2019. And overall, we have to understand that the plan here was not to build a dynasty. The plan was to go all in 2019, and the Raptors absolutely did that. They had an incredible run. They were 5th in defensive rating in the regular season, had an amazing defense surrounded by Nick Nurse's style of coaching and defense with his team. They had the 4th best defensive rating in the playoffs. They had the 5th best offensive rating in the regular season, so top 5 in both defensive and offensive rating. It's absolutely what you need for a perfect championship team. They were 7th in the playoffs in offensive rating. Like I mentioned, they had great coaching, went all in with Nick Nurse as their primary coach, and they also had great depth. They were able to comfortably run an 8-man rotation to get contributions from everyone in the playoffs, and they had the best player in the league at the time in Kawhi Leonard. In 2019, they had the perfect plan of load managing Kawhi. He absolutely dominated the playoffs, was by far the best player in the NBA playoffs. He dominated games down the stretch, and while even though they did get a little bit lucky with the Golden State Warriors having a few injuries, there's no doubt that this Raptors team right here was absolutely a championship team, and they absolutely deserved that NBA championship. Now, we fast forward to 2020, when the expected happens, and to be honest, it did get to a point where the Raptors were so good of a well-built team, and they had such an amazing run, and obviously their fan base is just absolutely incredible. That parade stands out to me as one of the greatest moments in Raptors franchise history, but unfortunately Kawhi still does leave. Now, of course, going into the trade that Masai Ujiri made to acquire Kawhi Leonard, he knew that Kawhi was not going to re-sign very likely. If you ask me, when he makes that trade, he's thinking there's about a 10% chance that Kawhi's going to stay. Now, the great happens, and it does end up getting to a point where it's like a 50% chance or something that Kawhi's going to stay. Unfortunately, he does end up going to the Los Angeles Clippers. The Raptors still have a good run with their team without Kawhi, unfortunately losing a very close Game 7 in the NBA bubble to the Boston Celtics. They had the best defense in the league this season, second in defensive rating in the regular season, and the very best defensive team in terms of defensive rating in the NBA playoffs. Got a little bit unlucky and lost Game 7 in a very close game to the Boston Celtics. Then after this season, as we know, they lose a core piece in Marc Gasol. He was starting to show in the playoffs too that he didn't have the shooting ability anymore. At times he was a defensive liability, so he obviously regressed, wasn't the same. He leaves the team, and another core piece and defensive anchor in Serge Ibaka also leaves the team. So now all of a sudden the Raptors are sitting here going into the 2020 and 2021 season, being down Kawhi, Danny Green, Marc Gasol, and Serge Ibaka, and being up Aaron Baines. So obviously it's not a good situation, but like I said, we have to remember that this right here was not the plan. They weren't trying to build a dynasty, and in 2019 they weren't thinking about their future, and for good reason. They won the championship, and it was absolutely worth it. Now fast forward to 2021, this Raptors team is in a position where they think they can make the playoffs, but obviously have a god-awful season. They finished with a record of 27-45. They have the 15th best defensive rating in the NBA, the 16th best offensive rating in the NBA, so obviously mediocre both in offense and their overall defense, and they ended up third last in the NBA in rebounds per game. And this right here is really what I think was the main bad thing about their team and how they weren't able to succeed, is how they just simply could not grab a rebound, especially on the defensive end of the floor. As I mentioned, they end up 12th in the Eastern Conference and have a horrible season. Now let me talk about here why I'm not mad. This right here was not the plan. This is the last time I'm going to make this point because I think you guys get it by this point. In 2019, I said myself as a Raptors fan that it was worth sacrificing our future for the NBA championship. And I know there's going to be tons of haters that come at me and all these other Raptors fans and say that, oh, you gotta stop living in 2019. But I'm telling you right now, why would I not stick to something I said in 2019 about the future of our franchise? We're supposed to be here right now. It's no secret that we're supposed to be bad right now. So why should I be mad that our team is in this situation right now? There's no reason why I should be mad about this. It was absolutely worth a championship. And let me ask you this question right now. Would you rather your team lose in the second round for 5 years straight or win a championship and miss the playoffs for the next 4 years? A lot of people might have different answers for this question, but personally for me as a Toronto Raptors fan, I'm absolutely taking that championship. A lot of people watching this video don't even know what it's like to live a championship run as a fan. And I'm telling you right now, this as a sports fan and an NBA fan, this championship run right here was absolutely worth anything that happens for the next 3 years. So I don't care if you say that if I'm not living in the present or I'm stuck in 2019, I don't care. That run right there was absolutely worth it, and I don't care what happens for the next 2 or 3 years in our franchise. And not even to mention that in terms of our future, we're not even in that bad of a situation. You have to apply the context to this 2021 season. If you go out on the internet and say that the Raptors are a poverty franchise, they are the Craptors, I highly encourage you to watch a game of basketball with your eyes and apply the context of the situation around the Raptors right now. Do you realize that of all the teams that had tons of excuses in this injury-prone and COVID year in the NBA, the Raptors had all more excuses than every other team in the NBA, and the best excuses of all of them. The Toronto Raptors had a 17-17 record and were sitting in the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference this season, 34 games into the season. Then they had a really bad COVID outbreak that kept out Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Malachi Flynn, Patrick McCaw, and for some of the games, head coach Nick Nurse. And in this stretch without them, they lost 9 straight games and now go to a record of 17-26. You also have to apply the context that they didn't play a single game this season in their home arena. They were constantly traveling and had a home arena in Tampa where none of their actual fans actually showed up to those games. You got to apply the context to that as well. They're obviously in a really uncomfortable situation that way. And for the last quarter of this season, this doesn't even count because we were literally just playing our bench players to tank for a better draft pick. So you have to look at this 27-45 record and realize that absolutely does not show what this team is actually about, specifically in this season. And like I said, none of this even matters to me anyway personally. Obviously, I would love it if my team could come back and make another playoff run, but it was all worth sacrificing our future anyway for the ring in 2019. Once your team wins a ring because they went all in and then they sacrificed their future, you'll understand. But for everyone that is a fan of a team that hasn't won a ring in the last 10 years, come back to me and talk to me once your team has won a ring, because I don't want to hear it if you're talking about how our team sucks right now, because we already got that championship. And now when we talk about our team right now too, we're not even in that bad of a situation. I already mentioned all of the excuses and valid excuses that we have to why this season was horrible, and now we're sitting here with a really good young core, the 4th pick in the NBA draft, where we're absolutely probably going to get a stud like Jalen Suggs, and like I mentioned, a pretty good young core. You've got 2 core guys like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, who are still pretty young and have some room for improvement, a defensive god in OG Anunoby, who's easily the most versatile defender in the NBA, a guy in Gary Trent Jr. who showed tons of improvement this season as a scorer and a defender. He's going to be a huge part for our team moving down the road in the season. You've got a guy in Chris Boucher, who looked like a 6th man of the year candidate at times this year, is a very versatile big man on both ends of the floor, a guy like Malachi Flynn, who has tons of potential, and the 4th overall pick, which will probably end up being a great future leader, playmaker, and scorer in Jalen Suggs. We still have a great coaching system and a great defensive system. I'm telling you right now, if we didn't tank for the last quarter of the season, we would probably still have a top 10 defense. Some of the teams are catching on to the defensive system where we do things like shrink the floor and recover out to shooters and help off with the pick and roll, but our defensive system is still really smart. If our team gets a rebounder and a really strong big man that can be a good defensive anchor and rebound the basketball, which by the way, this might be Khem Birch. It sounds crazy that Khem Birch could be the starting center of a playoff caliber team, but that could happen. He has a lot of potential as a traditional big man as well, but if we get someone else as well that can rebound and be a defensive anchor, this team right here is easily a playoff team next season. So that's going to be the end of today's video. If you ever see a Raptors hater on the internet, make sure to send them this video, because I felt great to get this rant out today. And you gotta realize that this season from the Toronto Raptors, first of all, has tons of valid excuses. They still have a very good future for their franchise, and they're not even supposed to have that right now. They weren't thinking about the future when they went out and got did the Kawhi trade and did the Marc Gasol trade and signed a few other guys to help their championship caliber team, and it was worth sacrificing the future for that championship run. And look at where we are right now. We have a great future with a good young core, and we haven't even sacrificed the future that much. So if you ever hate about the Raptors, apply the context. Know that we went out and went all in and got the championship. Know that we have a good future ahead of us, and just apply the context and be smart. The Toronto Raptors are not the Toronto Craptors, and if you fail to realize that, you are simply wrong. Thank you all for watching this video. If you're new, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next video.